In case you had any doubt where the president stood on the Alabama Senate race, he just made it crystal clear in a tweet, of course, attacking Democrat his name is Doug Jones. Trump signed off the tweet with "Vote Roy Moore." And tonight, the president will be holding a rally just 25 miles from the Alabama border in Pensacola, Florida. Let's bring in right now Sina Joe Johns at the White House. So, Joe, just yesterday, the White House said the allegations against Moore, they said once again, were extremely troubling. So what's going on now?
Well, going down to Pensacola, notably not going to Alabama, but it's still, you know, the mobile media market is 25 miles from Alabama, and the assumption is that the president is at least showing his face there just a few days before voters go to the polls, and he certainly is a big supporter of Roy Moore, so draw your own conclusions, but there's also a question here of plausible deniability, because Republicans say there could be quite a bit of blowback next year in the midterms when voters go to the polls, and it could affect the math, if you will, in the United States Senate. So the Republicans, the president, trying to have it both ways on this Roy Moore race, trying to get him into office and at the same time trying not to get too much of his fingerprints on them.
Yeah, it seems his strongest endorsement yet, though, of what he'd like to see Alabama voters do. So that's tonight, but the president's going down this weekend for the opening of a new civil rights museum in Mississippi. Congressman John Lewis, Congressman Benny Thompson, in hearing this, they announced that they're not going because the president is. The reaction from the White House after this has raised some eyebrows. What are they saying about this now?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I'll just read it to you. The reaction says, "We think it's unfortunate that these members of Congress would not join the president in honoring the incredible sacrifice civil rights leaders made to right the injustices in our history. The president hopes others will join him in recognizing that the movement was about removing barriers and unifying Americans of all backgrounds." The interesting part of that, of course, is that John Lewis, certainly an icon of the civil rights movement, and Benny Thompson both saying they don't want to go because they don't think the president is a good fit with the memory, if you will, of the civil rights movement, Kate.
All right, Joe Johns, thanks so much. Joining me right now, Brian Lanza. He's a former Deputy Communications Director for President Trump's campaign. And Scott Mulhauser is here, a Democratic strategist and former senior advisor to the Senate Finance Committee. Great to see you both. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
So, Scott, I'll start with you. Pensacola tonight. Plausible deniability that the president's not going down there to stump for Roy Moore? I mean, I don't get it.
So it lets the president hit Alabama voters without hitting Alabama. 1 in 6 Alabamans are hit by that media market. It's very clearly a way to campaign for Roy Moore, but have the plausible deniability.
Why do you need plausible deniability if this morning you tweet out "Vote Roy Moore"?
Well, Joe made a good point. I think he's got an eye on 2018. He's got his eye on his own reelection. You know, whether he thinks Roy Moore is going to lose, whether he wants to, yet again, have it both ways, that's clearly what he's balancing right now.
But, Brian, I mean, what do you want to hear from Donald Trump tonight? I mean, you know, you never know what's going to happen when Donald Trump gets on the stage for a big rally like this. But if he doesn't talk about Roy Moore, what does that say?
I mean, listen, he is all in for Roy Moore. He's put out his endorsement. He has the apparatus of the RNC behind him. So there's no plausible deniability in any of this stuff. Like, he is all in. And, you know, he planned this ahead of time before his endorsement. So people were very excited. I'm sure they didn't have an opportunity to, if they wanted to do another event in Alabama.
Laura Trump cut robocalls saying, "I hope you guys can come on over and join us."
They're all in. They're not having it both ways. And this is what the president does, is when he gets behind somebody and he's made a determination that, as troubling as these allegations are, they still are allegations, but when you compare that to what a liberal in Alabama would mean to the U.S. Senate and to how his agenda moves forward, you know, he has to put focus on that. I mean, the American people voted for a specific type of change that they're getting with the president.
If you're back in your old job, are you happy he tweeted this out this morning? Because you've got these two messages that do not go together, which is, we find these allegations extremely troubling. We want to let Alabama voters decide for themselves. And then you've got the president saying, no, you vote for Roy Moore.
If I'm in my old job, I learn to adapt. I mean, that's the one thing I learned about working for President Trump during the campaign, is you never know what the next hour is going to bring. And so you just learn to adapt and you roll with the punches. Some good comes to some of these tweets. Some tweets, sometimes they make us a little bit uncomfortable, but overall they've had a positive effect.
Do you acknowledge that in some strange way that Roy Moore would be the best thing to happen to Democrats in 2018. Do you think that's true?
Look, let's start with the fact that sexual harassment has no place in our Congress, and I think what we've seen from Roy Moore is pretty despicable across the board. Is it a campaign wedge issue that Democrats could use? Yes. Would folks rather not have Roy Moore in the Senate, given his history? I think that's also true.
Let's play upside downside. We're going to call that a game today. Brian, first to you.
Here we go.
Upside. Another strong economic report. 228,000 jobs added in November. Unemployment remaining at a 17-year low. Downside, the president's approval rating in a new Pew survey is at 32%, matching what they say is the lowest that they've seen in any poll since he took office. 63% disapproval. These two things, great economic numbers and approval ratings, they don't often go in the opposite direction. What is going on here?
You've had some distractions in the past year that have prevented the White House from talking about these economic numbers. The investigation's obviously been a huge distraction, and that sucks up a lot of oxygen so that you're not talking about the economy. You're not talking about unemployment in the Latino community being historic lows. You're not talking about, a 20-year low of unemployment in the black community. Those things happen, but they'll get through it. They'll power through it. 32%, if that's what it is, that's what it is. But as he has more successes going on in the coming year, you'll see that number improve. And as you start to look at the November election for next year, it's Trump, who's going to be driving the agenda, who's going to be the main issue, but it's also Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. And when the voters have to make a choice between those two agendas, we're pretty confident that they're going to choose
But
those.
Also, just ask James Carville, what often decides elections is the economy. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you think that was different now?
I think what you're
They're
seeing...
hoping.
Well, of course they're hoping. But do you think that's... Because if these are the numbers in 2018, good luck, Democrats. That's what Republicans would say.
Yeah, but these economic numbers aren't viewed in a vacuum. I think what you're seeing the economy continue to grow as it has for several years, but you're also seeing these sort of President Trump walk in, claim to drain the swamp, claim to do a host of things, and the first year has been a struggle in terms of real substantive accomplishments. And that first accomplishment, which appears to be the looming success of tax reform, I think folks see wage growth not going up and see the bulk of that going to corporations, and they're skeptical.
Final. Misstep on how they responded to John Lewis, saying they're disappointed that he's not going to join them in honoring civil rights leaders?
It's not the answer I would have sort of gone forward with, but it is a shame that John Lewis can't be there. I mean, I think it's a historic moment for our country. We come together during certain particular moments and put the differences aside, and this could have been that opportunity. And it is, I'm discouraged that he's not there. I hope he changes his mind, but I believe that the president welcomes it in any time.
Brian Lanza would have written the statement differently. We'll just leave it there. Great to see you guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Coming up next.